Hello everyone. I hope everything is great. So today we will discuss about the CSS selectors, or we can say how we can select the HTML elements in the CSS. In earlier of my videos we discussed about the simple tag selector. Today we will discuss that and as well as some other simple selectors. So let's start without wasting time. So just for time save, I create here one HTML file and one external CSS file named with the selector.html and selector.css file. Also, I add the basic HTML structure with the title tag and also the link tag with this external CSS. You can see here. Okay. And also I open this file in the browser. So let's start with adding some tags. Here I add one div tag. Inside that I add one heading CSS selectors. Go to here, refresh. So first we discuss how many type of selectors we discussed today. So for that I simply add one ordered list here and add few list items. I just copy this line for adding more selectors. So first we will discuss about the element, or we can say tag selector. Second we discuss the ID selector. Third we discuss the class selector. Then we discuss the universal selector. And at last we discuss the group selector. So today we will discuss these selectors, how we can select by use of these things. Okay, so let's first start with the simplest one, which is the I add heading with the h3 because it is subheading element or tag select. So as you know, in HTML these are the elements is represented with the start and close angle brackets, right? uh, an element can be div, an element can be h2, heading tags, body tags are also represent the HTML element. So we can select any HTML element with the name of this element or tag name. What is the syntax for this and what is the definition for this? Let's discuss that. So we can say by element selector we can select any HTML element. Okay, what is the syntax? Syntax is this: we need to give the element name, sep, then add the space, and then one curly braces, and inside this curly braces block we need to give the CSS properties. Okay, so this is the basic structure. Element name can be div, it can be h2, ol, li. Each of the HTML element we can select this way, and then with the curly braces, inside the curly braces we can describe the CSS properties. So let's select one and start with the body tag only. So in CSS what we did, First give the tag name or element name, which is the body, then add the curly braces, and inside this curly braces let me add one CSS property, which is the background color. Okay, and here we add let's this color with the name, or you can give the RGB value, you can give the HSL value, HSV value. We discuss all these things in my earlier video. If you don't have the idea about the background colors or how you can assign the colors, you can check my earlier videos. Also, I add the link in the description section. You can check it from there or simply subscribe our channel and get all the videos. Here I save this file, go to browser and refresh. You can see the body background color is now changed when we select this. Okay, so this is all about this element tag selector. This way you can select any HTML elements. Let's discuss the another one. I add the separate div here and add the heading ID selector. So by ID selector, you can also select any HTML element in CSS. How? We can say by use of ID selector, you can select HTML element. Okay, for this, you need to set the ID attribute of element, and then by referring the value of that attribute, you can you can select the element. Okay, so for this we need to set the ID attribute of every element that we want to select in CSS. What is ID attribute? So in HTML, every element we can assign the ID for that element, and then we can identify that specific element in CSS. It's the standard practice that we need to give this ID property as the unique. Okay, so what I did here, I just give the ID attribute for this h3 element this way, and then give let's subheading. Okay, so this is the basic syntax. Let me add the syntax as well. First we need to set the ID. Here we need to give the ID value. Then in CSS we refer the ID value and curly braces, add the CSS properties here. Now this syntax will look same like this element name. How we can differ the ID name and the tag name? So for ID, when we refer this, we need to add a symbol which is the hash symbol before the ID value. This way compiler of CSS know that this is the ID value, and it search the ID value in the HTML and then add the CSS accordingly. So let's refer this subheading here. First I need to add the hash symbol subheading and add the CSS property color, and let's give the color white. So after saving this and go to browser, refresh, you can see the ID selector, or we can say this heading will be now in the chrome silk color. So this way you can select any element in subheading. There is one rule for giving this heading. Let me show you. If we start the subheading with the numbers, then it's not working in CSS. See, the editor itself shows the error. And if I save this and this HTML file as well, go to browser, refresh, you can see the CSS is not reflected here. So you need to remember this thing. I add this in highlighted form. ID value should not start with number. ID value should not start with the number. You can see. And also this is the standard practice that ID must be unique in a page so that we can uniquely identify an element. Here refresh and this is added this way. I just add the one br tag here, so this way you can also create a good page. And also one br tag is added here. Save this, go to browser, refresh, you can see. So this way you can select the element by using the ID selector. So ID selector basically start from the hash symbol and then the ID value. Let's move to the class selector. So same as the ID selector, we have the class selector. Let's discuss this. As we have the ID attribute of the HTML element, same way we have the class attribute. So we can say by use of class selector, you can select HTML element. For this, you need to set the class attribute, then refer this. Okay, so uh, just for quicker thing, I remove this error from this CSS so that my subheading ID is selected properly. Save both the files, go to browser, refresh. Okay, so now this class selector heading is also added here. And what is the syntax? First we need to set the class attribute, then by referring this and curly braces properties, we can add this. Now how we differentiate this with the tag? So whenever you refer the class value, you need to add the period symbol here. Okay, so this way you can select the HTML element by their class attribute. Okay, let me quickly add class attribute for this, and here I give the syntax because this will show the syntax. Now go to here, and what I did, refer syntax, start with the period symbol, then the class attribute value, and let's select the color attribute. and give the color maybe dark green. Save, go to browser, refresh, and you can see my this paragraph only have this dark green color. We have lots of paragraph in this page, but as we refer this with the dot class symbol and use this class attribute value in the CSS, we select only this paragraph. Now, if we want to select all these syntax paragraph, what we did, we simply copy this class here and paste in the syntax for the ID selector as well as for the tag selector. Save this, go to here and refresh. Now you can see this class syntax will be reflected onto all these syntax. So this way you can add the CSS for multiple element that are having the same CSS. Okay, so this is all about the class selector. Class selector also have this rule. We don't need to start with the number, otherwise it will not select. Yes, CSS class can be repeated. We can use this attribute multiple time in a page, but ID uniquely identify an element. That is the standard practice. Let's discuss the universal selector. So as we have the class, first let me add the heading universal selector. Okay, so as we have the class selector and ID selector, tag selector, universal selector select all the element, selects all the elements. It does not have any specific attribute. We need to refer this with this way with the asterisk symbol, then space, curly braces, and CSS properties. So this symbol will select each and every element of the HTML, right? I add the class syntax here so that this will also reflect in the green color. Okay, let's select this thing. So what I did here, I add the strict symbol, curly braces, and let's remove the margin of each and every element and set it to 0 pixel. Save this file, go to browser, refresh the page, and you can see all elements margin are now 0. All the paragraph margins, all the headings margins are removed. Okay, let me remove this thing. So if you want to remove all the default properties of each and every element, you can set this way, and then you can define according to you the margin of headings, boardings, body tags, and other tags. So you need to define this in the universal selector. You by universal selector you can select each and every element of HTML. So that's all about the universal selector. Let's quickly discuss the group selector. I add the div here, heading. So group selector, we can group these selectors by using the comma. Comma separated way we can identify multiple selectors. What is the syntax? Let me add the paragraph here. Also add the class syntax so that we have the green color syntax, and let me first add the ID value. then comma, class value, or maybe some tag name, then curly braces and CSS property. Okay, so this way now this CSS will be reflected on this ID value, this class value, and this tag, and all these CSS properties are applied into these three. So this way you can select the group of element. Okay, let me give you one example here. What I did, let's assume this is the first div, and actually it have the overview, so I add the ID attribute and give overview. Okay, and in second div we give the class element view. So this is just the name, you can give this name according to you, and as this class can be repeated, I add this class for each and every container of div. Here for class selector and also for universal selector, and also add this for group selector. Okay, now what we did, I first select the with the ID overview and add the border 1 pixel solid and color maybe brown. Save this, go to here, refresh, and you can see this brown border will be reflected into this. Now if we use this CSS and add the border same for each div, what we did, we use the group selector separate with comma, and this way add the class as well. So now this CSS will be reflected for this ID and as well as for this class. Save this, go to here, refresh, and you can see all the container now have the borders. Let me add a margin as well here, and 10 pixel. You can add multiple CSS as well here. Okay, so you can see the borders are added for each and every div, and also the margin is added 10 pixel. So this way you can select the HTML elements in CSS by using these simple CSS selectors. So these are the basic selectors, and by use of these you can create a combination of CSS, right? So for this video that's all. In next videos we will discuss some more selectors. For now that's it. If you like this video, you can comment on this video, you can like, you can share, and also subscribe our channel. For now that's it. Bye bye guys.